The recycling bin was full. That was the first thing I noticed when I pushed open the front door of our Cambridge brownstone. Not my husband's coat on the hook, not the smell of the Thai takeout he always ordered on my late nights, but the recycling bin sitting 6 inches too far from the wall, the way it always ended up when someone had been careless about pushing it back. My husband was meticulous about the recycling bin. He had a thing about it. So did I, actually, which was probably why we worked, or why I thought we worked. Two people who cared about the same small, ridiculous things. A Boston November had soaked me through on the walk from the tee, and I was tired in the specific, joyless way that comes after 3 days of client presentations in New York that hadn't gone the way I'd planned. My portfolio was good. My pitch was tight. The agency had still gone with someone else. I'd cried in the Amtrak bathroom on the way home and told myself I was done crying about it. I wasn't done crying, I just didn't know it yet. "Honey, I'm home," I called out, dropping my overnight bag on the floor and not caring. The living room was dim. The good lamp, the one from the estate sale in Somerville that my husband had complained about carrying up 3 flights, was off. That was strange. He always turned it on when he was home. Something about the overhead light being harsh. I heard his voice first. Low, careful. The way he spoke on important calls. He was in his office, the small converted bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was barely open, just enough to let a narrow line of warm light fall across the hardwood. I almost knocked. I don't know why I didn't. Some animal instinct I've never fully been able to explain, like the body understanding things the mind is still arguing about. I stood still in the hallway and I listened. "There's no need to rush," he was saying. "The trust paperwork just needs her signature. She won't look closely. She never does. She trusts me." His voice had a warmth in it that I recognized, the particular warmth he turned on when he wanted something, when he was managing something, making it smooth. "She trusts me." I heard him smile when he said it. The other voice was a woman's. Soft, private, the register of someone who had earned the right to speak that way in someone else's space. "She hasn't asked about the account at all? Not once. She thinks it's a standard inheritance transfer. Once she signs, it moves to the holding structure and we're untouchable." His voice dropped. "We're almost there, just be patient." The woman laughed, quiet and low. "I know your patience better than you do." I stepped back from the door. The hardwood was cold through my wet socks. I stood there and I let it settle over me, the information, and I noticed with a strange clinical clarity that my hands were not shaking. Something had gone still in me, very still, the way water goes still, just before it freezes. I went to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water. I drank it standing at the sink, looking out at the fire escape, at the bare November branches of the neighbor's tree. I heard his office door open. I heard the soft tread of someone who knew which floorboard creaked. I heard my husband's voice, easier now, social, saying something I couldn't make out, and then the front door opening and closing with a careful click. I set my glass down. "You're home." He appeared in the kitchen doorway in his reading glasses and the gray cable-knit sweater I'd given him 2 Christmases ago. His face arranged itself into the expression I knew, open, pleased to see me, slightly distracted in the attractive intellectual way that had first made me fall in love with him. "I thought your train was the 9 o'clock. Earlier one was less full," I said. My voice was perfectly even. A miracle. Who was that? He didn't miss a beat. He was good. He had always been good. "A colleague," he said, picking up my overnight bag from the hall where I'd left it. "The Hartwell matter. Sorry, I should have texted. We lost track of time going over depositions." I nodded. I let him kiss my cheek. I let him carry my bag upstairs and I stood in the kitchen with the recycling bin pushed 6 inches too far from the wall. And I did not fall apart. Not yet. Not here. I waited until he was asleep. I am a brand strategist. My job is to understand what something is actually saying beneath what it appears to be saying. I am good at it. I have never once turned that skill on my own life. Not really. Not with honesty. And sitting in the dark of my own kitchen at midnight with my laptop open and my husband's breathing audible through the ceiling, I understood that this was a failure of imagination I would not be making again. He used his personal email for the things he didn't want tracked on the firm account. I knew the password because he'd given it to me 2 years ago to confirm a dinner reservation when his phone was dead. He'd never changed it. He trusted me. He'd said so himself. I found the first email in 14 minutes. It was from an account I didn't recognize, a name that meant nothing to me at first. But the subject line said Ray, Ellison Trust Transfer, and the Ellison Trust was my father's trust, the one established before he died 18 months ago, the one that was supposed to pass to me in full on my 35th birthday or upon marriage, the one my husband had offered to help me manage because he was a corporate attorney and I was not. I read every email in that thread. Then I opened the ones before it. Then I sat with what I understood. The inheritance was real. My father had left me $412,000, a number I had known in the abstract, the way you know a thing that feels too large to touch. My husband had offered to shepherd it through the legal transfer process 8 months ago, and I had been grateful, and I had signed what he put in front of me because he was my husband, and I trusted him, and that, apparently, was the point. There was a holding company I had never heard of. There was a secondary account opened in both our names at a bank I had never visited. There was a woman named Rachel whose voice I now recognized, a real estate attorney at a firm across town whose name appeared 72 times in his emails over the past 9 months. Her messages were professional in their language and intimate in their ease. She knew him. She knew this plan. She had helped design it. I saved everything to a private folder on a cloud account my husband didn't know existed. Then I closed his email and opened my own, and I looked at the ceiling and I thought about the recycling bin, about the small, ridiculous things, about how 2 people who care about the same small things are not the same thing as 2 people who care about each other. I did not sleep. By 4 a.m., I had a plan. There are things you don't know about yourself until the moment demands them. I did not know I could perform. I did not know I could smile at a man across a breakfast table, accept coffee from his hands, listen to him talk about the week ahead with the particular mixture of authority and affection he used to signal that we were a team, and feel nothing but a steady, purposeful cold. He left at 7:30. I waited until I heard his car pull out, and then I made 2 calls. The first was to a woman named Carol, a family law attorney whose name I'd been given by a former colleague who'd gone through a divorce so thorough and well executed that her ex had left Boston entirely. Carol answered on the second ring. She sounded like someone who had been expecting a call like this her whole career. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did. The second call took longer to decide on. I stood at the kitchen window for several minutes before I made it. The number was in my phone under a name I almost never used. My mother-in-law and I had a relationship that was polite and careful, like 2 people in adjacent cubicles who'd learned each other's schedules to avoid the copy machine at the same time. She was a precise, contained woman who had never once in 4 years offered me an unsolicited opinion about her son. I had respected that about her. I was about to find out whether it meant something else. She answered immediately. "Maya," she said, and her voice was different from how it was at Christmas dinners. It was quieter, alert. "I think you know why I'm calling," I said. A silence. Then, yes. "I've known something was wrong for months. I didn't know how to reach you in a way that wouldn't." She paused. "He's very good at making himself the reasonable one." "I understand that now," I said. She exhaled. A long, tired sound. "Where are you?" "Home." "Don't use your home computer for anything sensitive. Go to a library or a coffee shop. I have something you need to see. Can you meet me tomorrow morning?" Her name was Patricia, and she had been married to a man not unlike her son for 11 years before she had figured out how to leave. She had not left with nothing because she had spent 2 of those 11 years making sure she wouldn't. She met me at a coffee shop in Newton, a neighborhood neither of us had any reason to be in. She was already seated when I arrived, her hands around a mug, her posture the posture of a woman who has learned to take up exactly as much space as necessary. She slid a manila envelope across the table before I'd even taken off my coat. The documents inside were copies. A financial power of attorney drafted 8 months ago, filed with a notary bearing my signature. I had not signed it. The signature was close. It was very close. But it was not mine. He did this before, Patricia said quietly. Not with the money, not on this scale. But the architecture of it, the patience, the way he uses the language of partnership to get what he needs. She stopped. He did this to a woman he dated before you. She found out very close to the end. I looked at the signature that wasn't mine. What happened to her? She left, quietly. He let her go quietly because she had nothing on paper. Patricia's eyes met mine across the table. He learns. Each time he gets more careful, more legal, more protected. The forged power of attorney is a different level. That's a crime, Maya. Not just a betrayal. I thought about the email thread. About Rachel, who had helped him design this. About my father's money. The money my father had worked his whole life to leave me. Sitting in a holding structure I hadn't known existed until 2 nights ago. What do you want to happen? Patricia asked. I want it all back, I said. Every dollar. And I want him to understand that I was the one who took it back. She nodded once, like she had been waiting to hear that exact sentence. Then she opened her own bag and set a prepaid phone on the table between us. Use this for anything about this. I have a friend, a forensic accountant, who owes me a considerable favor. And I think you should know that the attorney he's been working with, Rachel, has done this before. She has a complaint pending with the bar that nobody's done anything about yet. Evidentiary support, she said with a slight, deliberate emphasis, could change that. I took the phone. It was lighter than I expected. We understand each other, I said. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile, but close enough. We do. She picked up her coffee. Now eat something. You look like you haven't slept in 2 days. I hadn't. But I was starting to think I might again. The performance was its own education. I had always thought of myself as a person constitutionally incapable of sustained dishonesty, too expressive, too transparent, the kind of person whose face gives everything away before the mouth can catch up. I was wrong. What I had mistaken for transparency was trust. When trust is removed, the face does whatever is necessary. My husband noticed nothing. He was absorbed, as he always was, in the management of things. He managed his caseload, his professional image, his dinner reservations. He managed me, or believed he did, with a combination of attentiveness and assumption that I had never thought to examine. He'd ask how a client meeting had gone with the specific, flattering attentiveness of a man whose interest makes you feel seen, and I had spent 4 years feeling seen, and now I understood that being observed and being known are not the same thing. I let him believe the trust transfer was proceeding. I asked careful questions, admiring questions, the kind that made him feel like a man explaining something complex to someone grateful for the explanation. I asked about the timeline. I asked what I'd need to do. I kept him talking, and Patricia's forensic accountant, a quiet man named Dennis who communicated only through the encrypted app she'd set up, was watching every movement. Dennis found 3 things Carol hadn't yet seen. The first was that the holding company had been established not 8 months ago, but 14, 6 months before my father died, when my father was sick enough that an inheritance was a calculable certainty. The second was that the secondary account had already moved $80,000 out, not in, out, to an account belonging to Rachel's firm, framed as a legal services retainer. The third was that my husband had taken out a private loan 2 years ago, using the projected value of my inheritance as collateral, a loan whose terms were due to mature in 4 months. He was not just stealing from me. He was underwater, and I was the rope he planned to pull himself up with. The shape of it made me tired in a way the original betrayal hadn't. The affair, whatever it was a wound I understood. This was a different thing. This was a man who had married me with a calculator in his chest, who had looked at my trust and my father and my willingness to believe in him and had seen infrastructure. It was almost impressive in its coldness. Almost. I asked him to dinner on a Thursday. A real dinner, the good restaurant in the South End we went to for anniversaries. He was pleased in a way that saddened me. Pleased and slightly self-congratulatory, as if my wanting to spend time with him confirmed something about himself. He wore the blue tie I'd given him. He ordered the expensive bottle. He was charming in the way he could be when he chose, attentive, funny, drawing me out about a project I was working on with a curiosity that felt real. Maybe it was real. Maybe both things could be true at once. Maybe that was the hardest part. Over dessert, I mentioned the trust. Casually, between bites of chocolate cake, I ran into Dennis. I used a made-up name, the financial advisor my father used. Just bumped into him at the farmer's market. He mentioned he hadn't received the usual documentation from the new account. Said something seemed incomplete. My husband's face did something complicated and controls it in under half a second. Just a follow-up thing, he said easily. Probably a timing issue on their end. I'll look into it next week. I've been thinking, I said, looking down at my fork. I'd like to take a more active role, going over everything myself, just to understand it. He was so used to the version of me that deferred to his expertise that he didn't hear the sentence I was actually saying. That's probably a good idea, he said generously. I can walk you through it all. Saturday morning? Perfect, I said, and smiled at him the way I had learned to smile over the past 3 weeks, which is to say I smiled with my whole face and nothing else. I called Patricia from the library on Friday morning. Carol has everything, I told her. Dennis has every transaction traced back to the forged document. We have the original power of attorney comparison, which a handwriting expert has already flagged as fraudulent. Is it enough? Patricia asked. More than enough, I said. Carol wants to file Monday. Patricia was quiet for a moment. The thing with Rachel? The bar complaint is being reactivated. Carol sent the supporting documentation Thursday. Another pause. Then, his firm's senior partner dinner is next Friday. I was planning to attend as a guest. I've been a donor to their foundation for 11 years. My presence would not be unusual. I let that land. I thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. I'll be there, I said. She almost laughed. I know. The firm of Barrett, Holloway & Crane held its annual senior partner dinner at the Mandarin Oriental. It was an event that existed to confirm hierarchies and celebrate the kind of professional achievement that needs a room full of witnesses to feel real. My husband had been up for consideration for senior partnership for the past 18 months. Tonight was, as he had told me 3 times that week, important. I wore white. I don't know entirely why, except that it felt true. Patricia met me in the lobby, elegant and charcoal gray, and she squeezed my hand once without saying anything. My husband found me near the bar. He looked handsome and slightly tightly wound, the way he looked before anything that mattered. He kissed my cheek. You look incredible, he said, and I believed he meant it, and I also believed that it meant almost nothing. You ready for tonight? I asked him. He picked up a champagne flute and smiled. Very much so. The dinner was exactly what it was supposed to be, well lit, expensive, full of confident people performing confidence at one another. I made conversation. I was warm and present. I asked the right partner spouses the right questions about the right children and the right vacation homes. I laughed. My husband watched me from across the room once with an expression of uncomplicated pride, the kind of pride that comes from possession, and I held it in my mind like a piece of evidence. Patricia moved through the room with the ease of someone who had attended 100 of these and been underestimated at every single one. The announcement came just after the main course. William Barrett himself, silver-haired and sonorous, rose to announce the firm's new senior partner class. My husband sat straighter at the table. I placed my hand over his on the tablecloth. He turned his palm up and held mine back, the familiar weight of it. And then I stood up. I don't know what my husband thought in that half second, whether he thought I was going to the restroom or reaching for my water or having some kind of episode. I stood and I crossed to where William Barrett had paused at the podium with a polite, inquiring look, and I said clearly, "I'm so sorry to interrupt. I have a brief matter that affects the firm directly, and I believe it needs to be addressed before any partnership decisions are finalized tonight." "I think you'd agree, Mr. Barrett." He was a man who had not been surprised in 30 years of corporate law. He looked at me for a moment with the calculating calm of someone assessing a situation. Then he stepped aside. I looked at my husband. He had gone completely still. "I have been married for 4 years," I said, my voice carrying in the suddenly quiet room, "to a man I believed was my partner in every sense. I trusted him with my father's estate, with an inheritance my father spent his life building and left to me with the instruction that it was mine, to protect and to use as I saw fit." I looked around the room, at the partners, at their spouses, at the carefully assembled professional world my husband had spent a decade constructing. Over the past 3 weeks, I have learned that my husband, with the assistance of an outside attorney named Rachel, used a forged power of attorney to redirect the management of that inheritance into a private holding structure designed to move those funds beyond my reach. The forgery has been confirmed by a certified handwriting expert. The financial trail has been documented by a forensic accountant. Copies of all relevant documentation, including the fraudulent power of attorney, the movement of $80,000 to an associated account, and the original loan my husband took against my inheritance without my knowledge or consent, have been filed with my attorney this morning and with the district attorney's office this afternoon. The room was not silent. It was the sound of a large number of people trying very hard to look as though they were not listening. I reached into my clutch and set a single document on the podium. "A copy of the filing. Something for your records," I said to William Barrett, whose expression had moved from assessing to something grimmer and more certain. My husband had risen from his chair. He was across the room from me, and he looked, for the first time in our marriage, like a man who did not know what to do. "Maya," his voice was low and controlled and shaking slightly underneath the control. "This is not the place. You chose the place," I said. "You've been building this, and this was always going to be where it ended, in a room full of people who should know." It was Patricia who spoke next. She had moved quietly to the edge of the room, and when she spoke, the room's attention shifted to her with the weight of it. "My name is Patricia," she said. "I am this man's mother." The silence that followed was different from the silence before. It was the silence of a thing being understood. "I want to say something I should have said years ago," she continued, her voice steady and precise. "My son is extraordinarily capable. He is also a man who has used that capability, repeatedly, to manipulate the people closest to him for financial gain. I know this because I watched it happen to someone else. I said nothing then. I am saying something now." She looked at her son, with an expression I could not fully name. Something beyond grief. "Samantha deserved better. My daughter-in-law deserves better. The woman before her deserved better. This is the last time." My husband's face, in the moment his mother finished speaking, did something I had never seen it do. The control cracked. What was underneath it was not anger, though anger came a second later. What was underneath it first was fear. He turned that fear into rage because that was what he knew how to do. "This is a setup," he said, his voice rising. "She's unstable. She's been paranoid for weeks. She has no idea what she signed or agreed to." William Barrett placed a hand on my husband's arm. The gesture was quiet and final. "I think we should continue this conversation privately," he said. "Tonight's announcement will be postponed." 2 firm associates appeared at my husband's side, not hostile, simply present, and he looked at them and understood exactly what they were communicating, and the rage drained out of him into something more like the cold he'd been carrying all along. He looked at me across the room. I thought he might say something that was true, something underneath all the architecture of it. He didn't. He looked at me the way someone looks at a problem that has become, definitively, someone else's. That was the last time I saw him as my husband. Carol called me at 9 the following morning. "He's already talking to his attorney about a settlement," she said. "Given the criminal exposure on the forgery charge, they're strongly motivated to make this quick and complete." I sat in Patricia's kitchen. She had made coffee and was not hovering, which was exactly right. I looked out at her backyard, a small, bare November garden, and thought about what quick and complete would mean. It meant the inheritance, every dollar, returned in full. It meant the dissolution of the holding company, the closure of the fraudulent account, the repayment of the $80,000 to my accounts. It meant the marital home, which I didn't particularly want, but which was mine to sell. It meant he would plead to a reduced charge, avoid trial, avoid prison, and leave Boston. His mother had already made clear she would be providing no further financial support. And Rachel? I asked. Her bar complaint is being formally reopened based on your documentation, Carol said. She has 2 weeks to respond. My understanding is that she won't. I thought about the recycling bin, about the 6-inch gap, about how much I had explained away over 4 years because it was easier than looking, about my father's trust and what it had meant to him, about what it meant to me now. The money returned, but the meaning of it changed, the way a thing can come back to you and still not be quite what it was. I don't know if I'm angry or just tired, I told Patricia. You'll be both, probably, at different times, she said. She poured herself more coffee. What do you want to do next? I had been thinking about this in the slow hours of the night. I had been thinking about the woman my husband had done this to before me, the one who had left quietly, with nothing on paper. I had been thinking about the fact that I had managed to get out intact only because Patricia had existed and had chosen at the last possible moment to use what she knew. Most people don't have that. Most people had the recycling bin pushed 6 inches from the wall and a sinking feeling they can't explain, and no one to hand them a folder and tell them to use the library computer. I want to build something, I said. Patricia looked at me. I design brands for a living. I help things that matter explain themselves in language other people can understand and trust. I want to do that for women in the situation I was in 3 weeks ago. Not a law firm, not a hotline, something else. A network that actually connects people with each other, with the Carols and the Dennises, with the practical knowledge that makes the difference between leaving with everything you're owed and leaving with nothing because you didn't know what you didn't know. Patricia set her mug down. She looked at me with an expression that reminded me, for a split second, of the way she'd looked when she'd slid the manila envelope across the coffee shop table. Like she had been waiting for me to arrive at this specific place. I have been a donor to women's legal advocacy organizations for 15 years, she said. I have been waiting for someone to build what you're describing. She paused. I have some resources I've been looking for, the right place to put. I looked at her. Really? My son is not the only one who plans ahead, she said, and this time she actually smiled. 3 months later, the brownstone sold on a Tuesday. I signed the paperwork in Carol's office and walked out into a February that was doing its best to be almost spring, and I didn't feel the way I'd imagined I would feel, which was free and triumphant. I felt the way you feel after a long illness, light and slightly disoriented, like the world has continued in your absence, and you need to relearn how to stand in it. My new studio was in a building in Somerville, 2nd floor, full of light in the morning. I had a drafting table and a decent espresso machine and a wall covered in index cards, which is how I think. The Phoenix Network, as Patricia and I were calling it, was 3 weeks from its official launch. Carol was on retainer. Dennis had agreed to consult. 2 other women I'd never met, who'd been connected through Patricia's existing network, had already reached out about their own situations, and I had spent 2 careful hours on the phone with each of them saying exactly what Patricia had said to me, which was, tell me everything. I was at the drafting table on a Thursday morning when my phone buzzed. A text from Patricia, lunch next week? I have someone I'd like you to meet. A journalist. She covers financial abuse. Thinks the network could be a story worth telling. I thought about it for approximately 4 seconds. I texted back, yes. Then I looked at the window at the February sky, which was doing something genuinely hopeful with the light. And I thought about my father, who had worked 40 years to leave me something that was supposed to make my life more certain. And I thought that maybe this was the use he'd intended, even if neither of us could have known it. Not a number in an account. Not security exactly. something harder to name and harder to take. I turned back to the drafting table. There was a lot of work to do. I was glad, for the first time in longer than I wanted to calculate, that I was the one doing it,